Enormous honour to be invited to come here and address this august association this evening, and I'm very grateful that you've invited me to do so. I want first of all to paint to you a very brief battle scene. Following weeks of careful planning and detailed preparation, thousands of grim-faced, resolute troops, relieved that the waiting was at last over, yet apprehensive at the violent reception that might await them, poured into Gaza in a shocking infantry assault supported by tanks and an overwhelming, thunderous barrage of artillery. The Israeli Defence Forces, at the start of Operation Cast-Lead's ground offensive in 2009? No. This was the decisive Third Battle of Gaza, almost exactly 94 years ago, in November 1917, in which General Sir Edmund Allenby routed the Turks from their stronghold in southern Palestine. It is apposite at this gathering of the Israel, Britain and Commonwealth Association to recall that Allenby's Egyptian Expeditionary Force was made up of both British and Commonwealth troops. And I'm sure there was the odd Irishman among them as well. Indeed, the critical moment of the battle was the capture of Beersheba on the first day by the Australian 4th Light Horse Brigade. And on mounts that hadn't been watered in 24 hours, the brigade formed up in 3 waves and charged across 4 miles of open terrain through withering Turkish shrapnel and machine gun fire. The audacity and the ferocity of the attack confused the Ottoman defenders, who fled in panic, were captured or killed, but with mercifully few Australian casualties. Ladies and gentlemen, on arrival in the Middle East from Europe a few months earlier, General Allenby, well over 6 foot tall, broad shoulders, square-jawed, looking around the room, I'm sure a few of you knew him, known as the Bull, or less delicately to put it, the Bloody Bull, General Allenby found the Turks entrenched in Palestine, with our own men entrenched just as strongly opposite. It was Western Front style, First World War, position warfare in its most stagnant form. Unwilling to stay and command things from Cairo, like his predecessor, Allenby trundled across the desert in a Ford car and set up his headquarters in a wooden hut 10 miles from the front line. Having delivered his sledgehammer blow against the Turks, Allenby had completely captured Gaza by November the 7th. 10 days later, his forces were in Jaffa. An editorial in the Manchester Guardian, published 94 years ago today, on the 9th of November 1917, read, and I quote, "Palestine is at present little more than a small district in the vast empire of Ottoman tyranny. But it will be a country. It will be a country of the Jews. For as Allenby was driving out the Turks, 2,000 miles away in London, the British Foreign Secretary, A.J. Balfour, had sent his historic letter to Lord Rothschild. And the Manchester Guardian's editorial of today, 94 years ago, continued, "The letter from Mr. Balfour is at once the fulfillment of an aspiration and the signpost of a destiny. But the letter from Mr. Balfour not only signposted the eternal destiny of the Jewish people. It also presaged a more immediate, stunning historical event. On the 7th of December, within a month of the Balfour Declaration, the British and Commonwealth forces, under Allenby, drove the Turks from Jerusalem itself, clearing the way for the Zionists, working with the British, to begin building up the Jewish national home promised by the Balfour Declaration. And by coincidence, ladies and gentlemen, the day the last Turk left Jerusalem was the first day of Hanukkah, the celebration, of course, of the Maccabean liberation of the city. At noon, on the 11th of December, rather than the customary triumphal entry on his charger, General Allenby dismounted and entered Jerusalem on foot through the Jaffa Gate. In the General's words, only one man rides into Jerusalem. Allenby's victory, one of the greatest of the war, was not without cost. In Gaza alone, of his 82,000 infantry and 17,000 cavalry, 18,000 men were killed, wounded and missing. But Allenby's force inflicted 25,000 casualties on the Turks. 2 battalions of my own regiment fought under Allenby in the Gaza campaign. One of those battalions was from the Suffolk Regiment, and I had the honour this evening of sitting on the same table as Captain Lewis Harris, who himself, a few years later, served in the Suffolk Regiment. It was a great privilege and pleasure to sit next to you, sir, this evening. The other battalion was the 16th of Foot, and members of the 16th of Foot won a Distinguished Service Order, 7 military crosses, 5 Distinguished Conduct Medals, and 16 military medals in the fighting in Gaza alone. Our colours, our regimental colours, the sacred embodiment of a British regiment, are still emblazoned with the battle honour Gaza. And even today, in 2011, our soldiers, many now battle-hardened from combat in Afghanistan and in Iraq, are taught about the glorious victory of their forebears in the liberation of Palestine from the Turks. A few months after Allenby's capture of Jerusalem, in summer 1918, the 38th Battalion, Royal Fusiliers, attacked the Ottomans some 20 miles north of Jerusalem. This battalion, which comes from the regiment of our defence attaché here in Israel, my good friend Colonel Philip Stack, who is here tonight, was part of Zev Jabotinsky's Jewish Legion, a British fighting force in which David Ben-Gurion was a private, and the young Golda Meir, though desperate to join, was turned down on the grounds that women were not being recruited. In mid-September, led by Jabotinsky, the Legion played an important role in the Battle of Megiddo, one of the final and decisive victories of the Ottoman front. And General Chater, the Australian divisional commander, told his Jewish troops, "By forcing the Jordan fords, you helped in no small measure to win the great victory gained at Damascus." Although the relationship between the British Army and Israel over the decades has not always been plain sailing, sometimes, such as in the period before the foundation of the State of Israel, very far from it. But General Allenby's campaign in Palestine, in the wake of the Balfour Declaration, was but the first of many examples of what was to become a long-standing military cooperation between Israel and Great Britain. I want to leap forward now nearly 20 years to the late 1930s.